thank you all for joining us today. I'm Bill McBride, Executive Director of the National Governors Association, and we are the 116-year-old bipartisan organization representing governors from the 55 U.S. states and territories. And we work with governors and their staff to identify challenges across states and territories in order to develop proactive solutions. Our government relations team specifically advocates for bipartisan policies on behalf of governors with federal agencies, Congress, and the White House. And the panel today will address readiness and resiliency of states and territories' critical infrastructure in order to combat disasters and emergent threats. It's important to address the pivotal role that governors play in safeguarding our communities. Their leadership is an essential aspect of implementing preparedness. And I'm now going to turn it over to our Legislative Director for Public Health and Disaster Response at NGA, Ms. Renee Antoine. So Renee, come on.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Welcome again to the National Governors Association Public Health and Disaster Response Congressional Briefing. Our time together today is meant to foster pathways for sustainable solutions within various aspects of homeland security, disaster preparedness, and emergency response. We will achieve this by highlighting priorities and examples of state and territorial experiences on the front lines. We will also hear from experts that will provide overviews of national systems and shed light on gaps in funding, policy, and regulatory processes. The spotlight on growth areas will be followed by suggested best practices to consider for our unified experience of bipartisan success. We are excited to have a panel of experts with decades of experience spanning state and territorial leadership, congressional appointments, private sector contributions, and public service. All of them bring unique and critical perspectives to our focus areas today. We recognize that a multi-sector integrated approach is necessary for our most complex issues to be first improved and then eventually solved. With us today, we're going to actually start with Russell Strickland as I introduce our panelists. I'm actually going to begin with Jason Gibbs since he's arriving now. Thank you so much. So with us today is Jason Gibbs. He currently serves as Chief of Staff for Governor Phil Scott, bringing extensive leadership and expertise to his 7+ years in this office. Jason previously served as Director of Partnership and Marketing for the Vermont Ski Area Association and Director of Partnerships and Marketing for the Commissioner of Forests, Parks, and Recreation for the state of Vermont as well. For more than 8 years, Jason has served as a Senior Policy Advisor for Governor Jim Douglas as well, and he was Director of and Secretary of Civil and Military Affairs, where he managed executive branch communications and, among other things, served as the governor's liaison for many different agencies and municipal officials. Next, we're going to have Russ Strickland. He currently serves as president of the National Emergency Management Association. Established in 1974, the National Emergency Management Association is a nonpartisan, nonprofit 501c3 association dedicated to enhancing public safety by improving the nation's ability to prepare for, respond to, and recover from all emergencies, disasters, and threats to our nation's security. NEMA is a professional association of and for emergency management directors from all 50 states, 8 U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia. Russ also serves as the Secretary of Emergency Management for the state of Maryland. Mr. Strickland directs a department with primary responsibility and authority for emergency preparedness policy and for coordination of hazard mitigation, incident response, and disaster recovery. This includes serving as director and advisor for the governor during disasters and coordinating support for local governments as requested. He has more than 40 years of experience in this field. After Russ, we're actually going to have John Ridgey with us today. John Ridgey serves as the National Advisor for Cybersecurity and Risk at the American Hospital Association in Washington, D.C. With a distinguished 30-year career in the FBI, John is the first to hold this position, supporting over 5,000 member hospitals. He utilizes his background from the FBI and CIA to tackle cyber threats, international organized crime, and terrorism, enhancing cybersecurity policies and advocacy. His work includes leading initiatives like the 2024 Change Healthcare Cyber Attack Response and the 2023 Joint Health and Human Services Hospital Cyber Resiliency Report. Finally, we have Madeline Bordallo. Madeline is the Director of Washington Office for Guam, Governor Juan Guerrero. Madeline has had a distinguished career in both local and national politics. She served as a senator in the Guam legislature across 5 terms, making significant contributions to local governance. She then broke new ground as the first woman to be elected Lieutenant Governor of Guam, a role she held from 1995 to 2002, where she championed tourism, environmentalism, and beautification projects. Following her tenure as a lieutenant governor, Madeline transitioned to national politics and was elected as Guam's delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2003. She served until 2018, focusing on economic issues, small business support, and military and environmental matters. Throughout her time in Congress, she served on the House Armed Services Committee and the House Committee on Natural Resources, and was actively involved in several caucuses aimed at improving conditions for Guam and its residents. Thank you all for coming today. We're now going to turn it over to Jason Gibbs, the co-chair of the Public Health and Disaster Response Task Force. Jason?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. As Renee mentioned, I'm Chief of Staff for Governor Phil Scott in Vermont. I also serve as the Federal Affairs Representative for our state. You're not surprised to discover that we have a very small office, and we all wear multiple hats. Governor Scott is currently co-chair of the Public Health and Disaster Response Task Force along with Hawaii Governor Josh Green. You are very well aware, of course, that Vermont and Hawaii have had significant natural disasters in the last 12 months. We'll talk a little bit more about those as we get into things. The task force that our governor co-chairs, it has jurisdiction over a broad range of issues: disasters, emergency public health response, homeland security, cybersecurity, National Guard, healthcare, human services, nutrition, immigration. It might seem like a bit of a random mix of topics, but we're here today to help show how these are very much intertwined and overlap. Additionally, for each topic that our task force has a corresponding federal priority, and it serves as the foundation for all of our, we set corresponding federal priorities, and it serves as the foundation for all of our efforts, and that is, of course, the reason that we're here with you today. In addition to the task force, Governor Scott also co-chairs the Council of Governors. It is a presidentially appointed council of 10 governors, 5 Rs, 5 Ds, appointed by the president to advise DOD and DHS on a range of issues. We'll talk a little bit about some hot topics from the point of view of the governors and the council a little bit more this morning as well. Speaking of hot topics, there's legislative proposal 480. It's kind of a curious creature. You're probably more familiar with its curiosities than we are in terms of process. But there was in the last National Defense Appropriations Act a request by the Congress, a directive by the Congress to continue the creation of the Space Force. That spun off into both a congressionally requested drafting request and also a legislative proposal, which is specific to the executive branch, as you know, that surprised the governors, all of them, and particularly perturbed the Council of Governors. The Council has a statutory responsibility to advise DHS and DOD on all things related to the National Guard. So anytime there is a proposal to do anything with the National Guard, and in this particular case consolidate some of the air assets into the new Space Force, it is advisable to DOD and DHS that they consult with the governors. You will hear a little bit more about how the governors are unsatisfied with that process as we move forward. The Council of Governors sent a letter to the Secretary of Defense sort of throwing up the flag and being like, hey, you should have talked with us about this. There is a real desire on the part of the governors that are engaged on COG to honor its role. And 53 governors signed a letter to the secretary requesting that there be much more deliberation on this particular proposal. I'll say a bit of an editorial comment here. It has less to do with the actual allocation of the assets to Space Force and more to do with you got to talk with them. You can't surprise them with stuff like this. So another reason for the discussion today is what you'll hear more about from other panelists is the increasing threat vulnerabilities across states and territories. Disasters are increasing in frequency and complexity. Emergencies are increasing in frequency and complexity. And more as states, we feel like that the responsibility of responding, though there are tremendous federal resources and assets dedicated to those responses, the actual day-to-day responsibility of handling whatever develops is falling to the states. And in the case of some of the cyber incidents that we'll discuss today, everyone looks at us as state governments. They say, hey, what are you doing? How are you handling this? How are you protecting my information? How are you getting my account unfrozen? I've been in and out of state government over the years. As Renee mentioned, I had the best job in Vermont, which is Commissioner of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. It is as good as it sounds. But I served in a variety of other roles as well, and I cannot recall a time where the number of incidents and emergencies has been as high as it has been in the last several years, and I fully expect the cadence of both natural and man-made interruptions to our normal operating posture to continue to escalate. So we're going to talk a little bit about those types of things today, and we very much appreciate your time. So with that, I will turn it over to Russ.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Special thanks to the National Governors Association for inviting NEMA, which is the National Emergency Managers Association, and Renee described it very well, so I don't really need to do that for you, other than to share with you if you have seen one state and or one territory, you have seen one state and one territory. We are all unique and different in the ways we handle before, during, and after disasters. We handle them, but the way it is coordinated within each state is different. So many of us are similar, but none of us are twins. So please keep that in mind. And I especially want to thank the committee, the Public Health and Disaster Response Task Force, for inviting us here today. And I would also share that we're forming an alliance, really informally, with 3 other organizations, and I want to recognize them. One is the International Association of Emergency Managers, which is made up of individual memberships. NEMA is made up of the state and the territory, so it's like one vote within that organization. The Big City Emergency Managers, which are all of your big cities in the nation, and then with NGA, the Governor's Homeland Security Advisory Council. We see a sharing of what it is we do before, during, and after disasters. And I believe all 4 of us agree beyond any question that disasters start local and they end local. So it's our responsibility at the state level to work with our local jurisdictions to manage and support them in their before, during, and after activities. And we coordinate that from a statewide perspective. As was mentioned, disasters are occurring with a greater frequency and complexity at a greater cost to state government than ever before. If we go back in time, in 2003, there was a Homeland Security Act as amended that was passed, and it assigned FEMA the responsibility of all hazards. Well, if FEMA at the emergency management level has been assigned all hazards, you can rest assured that trickled down to the states and the local jurisdictions. At the time, and still today, there is no definition of all hazards. It is very complex. We have no idea in the world what next disaster is going to walk through that door. And it's walking through the door on a daily basis someplace in our nation. We need to keep in mind, too, that FEMA at the federal level is not a first responder. Our local jurisdictions, combined with our state resources and assets, truly are the first responders in this nation. And in fiscal year 23, there were 60 events that required a federal major or emergency declaration. During that same time, state and local emergency managers managed 27,299 events without federal assistance. So that just shows the number of these disasters that have risen since 2003. And to keep in mind that emergency management is a partnership across not only our associations, but at the state and local level across our departments within each state and within the departments at the local level. So emergency management coordinates and brings the necessary people to the table to address these complex problems and assign resources and assets to take care of them. And at the state and local government level, we do realize that we need to invest more in before, during, and after. Historically, we have depended upon the federal government for that, and we still depend upon the federal government for that. So we're also being asked again, as we mentioned, to provide support to any growing number of challenges. One of the biggest challenges we do have, and we've looked at 3 areas this past year as major areas within emergency management to address. One is recovery, the other is workforce, and the third is technology. The workforce today is extremely challenging to get competent, diverse individuals who want to spend a career in emergency management. It's difficult to find people who want to sleep with their phone, knowing that they'll get a call at any minute, 02:06 in the morning for me on March 26th, and you've got to respond. You've got to react, and you've got to be ready. So that's a tough field to fill, but we're working across all disciplines to try and bring people into the opportunities within emergency management. And this is one of the reasons that we want to mention, too, that in FY24, the key programs that were cut that have painfully restricted or will restrict state governments and local jurisdictions. All of the preparedness programs that are offered through Department of Homeland Security / FEMA were cut 10%. That 10% within the Emergency Management Planning Grant, the Homeland Security Grant Program, will trickle down to the local level to mean that a office that has 2 people will lose one of those people. And it's extremely concerning at this point in time because since October, particularly with NEMA, we have heard from every federal official, starting with the National Security Council, down through the Secretary of Homeland Security, the FBI Director, the FEMA Administrator, about how serious nation-state threat is today. And we were cut 10%. And at the same time, the governors are being placed almost on notice that they may not have the ability to maintain the National Guard. Well, that wipes our emergency management response and recovery efforts off the table if they're not available. And we know that during a nation-state threat, they may very well not be available. And yet, we've got to figure out how to do that with less. The other area of interest to us to share today too is the Disaster Relief Fund, commonly referred to as the Stafford Act, and that's when we have either a presidential declaration or an emergency declaration. That's where the funding comes from to take care of that. For the second year in 2 years, this account is due to run out of money prior to the end of the fiscal year. Generally occurs during the summer months. The summer months when we have all the wildfires that are going on in the nation. The summer months, which are now starting in April and May, when we have the tornado season in the mid part of our country. And then we'll have hurricane season starting, actually has already started, on the eastern seaboard of our state, of our nation. So again, this is a vital program that needs to be addressed. Again, we're only able to access that when we do have a disaster. So with that, I would just simply close and thank you for the opportunity to speak from NEMA. I think I'm going to return in a few minutes to speak from the state of Maryland perspective and give you a little bit more ground truth to some of the things we've mentioned, but I'll certainly be available for any questions. So thank you.
John?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the National Governors Association for inviting me here on behalf of the American Hospital Association. So I was asked to give you a overview on the state of healthcare, cyber risk, and threats. Well, in a word, it is in critical condition. The state of cyber risk in healthcare, we are in critical condition. A couple of statistics. So according to the FBI, healthcare sector is in fact the most attacked by cyber adversaries of any critical infrastructure sector. Ransomware attacks against hospitals and health systems are up 300% just in the past 3 years. Data theft attacks impacting the privacy and security of Americans' healthcare records are up 500% since 2020. For example, last year, we had the healthcare records of 136 million Americans stolen or compromised in part or full. That was quadruple the number from 2022. And unfortunately, this year, we are on track to break that record once again. And primarily that will be due to the anticipated announcement by the United Health Group talking about the number of records which have been compromised in their attack. They've already described that a significant portion of the American population's records may have been compromised in that attack. So let me talk a little bit about the types of attacks that we suffer in healthcare. One, of course, are these data theft attacks, which impact the privacy and security of data. We have data extortion, where foreign bad guys, as I used to say in the FBI, steal the records and then hold them for ransom under threat of publicizing them on the internet or on the dark web. And then, of course, we have these devastating ransomware attacks, which deploy malware, which encrypts networks and data, forcing their systems to shut down and disconnect from the internet, which causes a very significant disruption to healthcare delivery, both on the local, regional, state level, and even on the national level. And then really the fourth category is all of the above. We see the bad guys combining data theft, data extortion, and ransomware attacks in one singular attack, and where that data is stolen, and then the victim is extorted, and then while deploying ransomware, and then also demanding a ransom payment for the decryption key. So as I indicated, the impact to healthcare delivery occurs on not only within the victim hospital or health system, but on a regional basis as patients and ambulances are diverted to surrounding hospitals, as external dependent organizations dependent on the technology of the victim hospital gets disconnected as well. And we see it on a state level as well, when we have seen large health systems, and on a national level, as experienced in the recent United Health Group Change Healthcare attack that disrupted healthcare delivery and hospital operations across the country. Now, who's doing this to us? Bottom line is, the vast majority of these attacks, 95% or more, are conducted by foreign-based bad guys, cyber adversaries that are either criminal organizations which are financially motivated and or nation states that are seeking to steal not only our healthcare records of Americans for intelligence value, but also our intellectual property, our medical innovation, medical research, and so forth. Again, the other big concern that we have that's really come to light here are these large systemic level organizations which are hit with ransomware attacks, such as United Health Group and Change Healthcare, creating again this national systemic impact to healthcare delivery. And we are working obviously very closely with state legislatures to understand what the impact and their capabilities were during this attack. And on the federal level, quite frankly, it was very disjointed, as the various federal agencies were unclear how they could respond. As indicated, often it needs a state request for assistance for emergency management. But what we do see consistently in these high-impact ransomware attacks is the need for organizations to consider cyber incident response planning as part of overall emergency management planning. And really, to work with your local emergency preparedness teams, as you said, the impact first is local, to understand what resources would be available. And quite frankly, when I'm in the field speaking to hospitals in assessing their emergency management plans, we realize that emergency management folks do a really good job at preparing for natural disasters, other type of non-cyber incidents. So what we proffer is leverage those existing plans, relationships, and mutual aid agreements for natural disasters, but include cyber as one of the incidents that folks would respond to. And one of the great examples of a statewide response to a major ransomware attack exists in Vermont. When in 2020, in the fall of 2020, University of Vermont Medical Center was struck by a very significant ransomware attack that shut down not only their technology and services, but these were services that the entire state depended on, the 14 other smaller hospitals, for imaging, for cancer treatment, for lab, pharmacy. So there was a statewide cascading effect when University of Vermont was hit. It's what I call a ransomware blast radius. The victim is hit, but there's collateral damage and disrupting shockwaves, in a sense, throughout the entire state. And Vermont was very good, forward-leaning, and the governor declaring a state of emergency and mobilizing National Guard cyber units to assist University of Vermont Medical Center. A more recent example we have in December is Liberty, Missouri. Medium-sized hospital hit there, but with a devastating ransomware attack that forced the evacuation of 85 critical patients to surrounding facilities. Both the state of Kansas and the state of Missouri activated emergency response plans to assist them in recovery from that ransomware attack. On the policy side, we're watching very closely. There is pending rules on the federal level that would require all hospitals and health systems to adhere to 22 basic and enhanced cybersecurity practices. The practices, I think, are really fundamental. We certainly have no issue on the practices. I helped write them. The issue is how the federal government will impose those on hospitals in terms of resources being made available to help less resourced hospitals in need, smaller rural hospitals. And the penalties proposed are very, very, very severe. And as we point out to the federal government, as exemplified by the United Health Group attack, is that hospitals are victims here. They are not the perpetrators of these attacks. Two, that a majority of the cyber risk exposure we face in healthcare does not originate from hospitals. It is from insecure third-party technology and insecure third parties. And the data shows that, even the government's data shows that the majority of data theft breaches, and over 95% of the largest data theft breaches in healthcare, are not from hospitals. They're from third parties and business associates. But ultimately, what all this demonstrates is that there is a need for the private sector, healthcare in particular, to work with state and federal agencies. We can't address the overall cyber risk we face as a nation without this public-private partnership. And it's really, as we did in counterterrorism and other major threats to the country, what's needed is not just a whole-of-government approach, but really a whole-of-nation approach. So I thank you, and I look forward to your questions later.
Thank you very much, John. The agenda calls for me to talk a little bit about some of our state-specific challenges. John pointed out that we had a major cyber challenge in 2020 related to our health network, and I would add to that, as I alluded to in my opening remarks, the number of incidents that we are facing as subnational governments is proliferating pretty significantly. I would say, from one person's point of view, that we cannot rely on the declaration of emergency. In some ways, that is what our adversaries are hoping we will do at the subnational level, that it will cause tremendous chaos, it will divert resources, it will cause us to divert attention to other ongoing needs. I won't bore you with all of the examples in Vermont. I think you're familiar with the highlights of the last year. Russ, are there any specific Maryland examples you'd like to provide before we turn it over to Madeline?
Yes, there are. Just a couple. First off, the Maryland Department of Emergency Management is just that. We're a department. We're a cabinet level position. I sit as a secretary on the governor's cabinet. That happened in October of 2021 when we were removed from the military department and placed at the cabinet level and combined with our 911 board. The interesting thing is, when we talk about some of these threats, we also house the state's Office of Resilience, where we're focused on resilience as across all hazards and not just simply climate related. When it comes to cyber, we too have experienced some very serious cyber events in the state, and because of that, we've created a cyber preparedness unit that does assessment, planning, training, and exercising with our local jurisdictions. In addition, that works with our Department of IT and our State Security Office, who also houses several National Guard personnel that are available to us to work on that program. So with that, we continue to focus on, and really the three main threats at this point in time within the state of Maryland are flooding. It seems like no matter what day it rains, we have some part of our state floods. Next is, in fact, cyber. And the third is that we're gearing up for nation-state threat and how that may impact our state. And as far as it goes for mitigation partnership efforts, that goes back to our Resiliency office, and that is an effort to bring all of our state departments that have any involvement whatsoever in mitigation projects to be inclusive of critical infrastructure protection into a group that looks across the entire enterprise and how we can build synergies as well as funding to make the project a better end result. And with that, I would
Turn over
pass
to
it.
Madeline.
Oh, Madeline.
Thank you. I may be in the minority up here, but I represent Guam, and I'd like to welcome all of you half a day. Has anybody been on Guam in the audience? Okay, so you will know that. That's our greeting. Well, almost 1 year ago today, Guam experienced one of the strongest typhoons worldwide during the year 2023. As a Category 4 typhoon, Mawar hit May 19th, 2023. And it was devastating wind speeds and heavy rainfall, causing extensive damage across the island. The 160-mile winds caused power outages, water outages, leaving many communities without power and water for days. There was a rapid response from local authorities. We have a very, very extensive rapid response team. And the President Biden, declared Guam a major disaster area on May 27th. This declaration was crucial to allow the distribution of federal funding, and over 150 FEMA personnel were on the island at this point. And I will say that when the FEMA authorities arrive on Guam, typical of an island community, we welcome them into our families, and next thing you know, they're enjoying barbecues and so forth. So we have a very close relationship with the FEMA personnel. The Recovery Office, however, is still working with FEMA, and Guam is still working on an extension letter to extend this recovery funding. The federal highlights the importance of preparing and how fast government responses in crisis situations can be beneficial to territorials with limited resources in times of a disaster. FEMA has opted or has noticed that we need recovery on our wind instruments. They seem to be old, and we are certainly working on that. That is one of their requests. And they also need upgrading, and some need to be better working. I know they're very old. And Guam has always responded quickly to disasters. Incidentally, we have an excellent recovery program. And people come together to help one another. But the typhoon did reveal the need for improving our infrastructure that can withstand the increasing number of disasters that occur, like a new hospital. Our governor is currently desperately asking for funding for a new hospital that can better serve our community. Remember, Guam, being a large island out there in the Pacific, takes care of the people of the many surrounding islands, and this puts a big burden on us. From my 16 years in Congress, I have also learned that territories must be included with bills, legislation, and their unique cultures, demographics, and physical locations must be taken into account. If territories are not included in legislation or specifically mentioned, it is very difficult to include language after the fact. Or we would have to introduce a standalone bill, which is difficult in passing. We have been in the position to receive funding and support because of the relationship that we have built, federal and congressional partners. And while those are incredibly valuable and are helpful, it's not the only way we should have assurance that territories will be included. The physical location of Guam, I know many of you know, we're also right in the middle of all the tension now in the Pacific. We're between China, North Korea, and Taiwan. We are the front lines with the nations and subject to their attacks just like mainland states. During the typhoon Mawar, Guam was also subject to a cyber attack by the hacking group Volt Typhoon. The Guam National Guard, and incidentally we have a very large guard, led a cyber conference to develop comprehensive and unified cyber plans. The Guam National Guard has been an important part of our own island and their responses and preparedness, but also remains a critical asset for the United States as a whole. On May 3rd, Governor Guerrero, our first woman governor, signed a declaration formalizing the partnership between Guam and the Republic of Palau, one of the Micronesian islands. The Guard will assist Palau with their preparedness and recovery for disasters to strengthen the ties with the U.S. Overall, territories play a crucial role in supporting the United States, especially as threats continue to evolve. It is our duty to support them and ensure policies reflect this strategic importance and consider the unique challenges that faced by Guam and similar territories. And I will say this, that the federal government has been upgrading Guam in many ways. I served on the Defense Committee for all the years I was in Congress. And they're now upgrading our missile defense. We have a new Marine base on Guam that I authored when I was in Congress. And as I spoke about earlier, my main request to Congress is to recognize the importance of strengthening territories and consider their unique challenges. There are considerable opportunities for partnerships that can benefit everyone, especially the community of Guam. Guam is the furthest territory from the mainland, and to make matters even more difficult, we are 14 hours ahead of the time in DC. So you know the challenge that we have. But I want to thank the federal government for their response to our situations, and we have had numerous typhoons on Guam over the years. And I will thank everybody for inviting Guam during this discussion, and I'm willing to answer any questions you have. And as we say in our language, si jus ma'asi.
Thank you so much. We are now going to transition, just to keep us on time, to a maybe 30 seconds from those who are not able to give remarks regarding a request to Congress. So in the room today, we have lots of congressional staff, we have federal partners, we have private agencies, and so maybe just one request you may have in any of the areas regarding funding or policy or workforce will be great. And then we're going to open up the floor for questions for anyone from the audience, between you all, as well as with the panelists as well. So we'll start with Jason Whitmore.
There's a letter coming. It articulates all of the requests that our task force has for funding in upcoming FY25 appropriations. I would draw your attention to that. I won't belabor the point.
3 things. 1, pass the management cost bill. 2, restore the 10% that was cut from the FY24 money. And then for the FY25 budget, increase the emergency management planning grant by $100 million.
Great. First, of course, we have a letter as well to Congress regarding the United Health Group change attack and making various requests there for support for those impacted healthcare providers. We would also request that that the bill known as the Cybersecurity Sharing Act of 2015 is about to sunset next year. Very important bill that provides safe harbor for threat information sharing between the private sector and the federal government, and we would look for a renewal on that, plus to include safe harbor regarding the impact of the attacks, which is currently not covered, but much needed information that needs to flow to the government. Thank you.
I have 2 requests. One is for funding to upgrade our wind instruments. And the second is an extension for the recovery after MAWA. We have a letter in for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to all our panelists.
One additional point on recovery. Housing, PA, public assistance, works great. FEMA's done some good work on IA recently to improve at least the communication and the expectation setting for affected residents. Housing is certainly in the case of the natural disasters, the most significant challenge that we face in long-term recovery. So I just offer that for your consideration.
We'd now like to open it up to questions from the audience and open floor discussion.
So I represent Governor Evers from Wisconsin in our federal office out here, and just kind of giving our perspective as well. Obviously, a lot of the same priorities that the panelists have given so far, and also thank you to NGA for pulling us together. I think this is really important to be able to kind of have this discussion and be in front of Congress. So kind of echoing that point, the Guard is critical in every aspect of disaster response, cyber response in the state of Wisconsin. Like every state, it was absolutely critical for testing, vaccination rollout, staffing augmentation for healthcare facilities in Wisconsin. But kind of going further and addressing the current needs, our Guard's defensive cyber operations element, they are called in to assist anytime the state cyber response team, like there's an anticipation of a response taking longer than 72 hours. A lot of these folks, on the state team have regular day jobs or are assisting in other ways. And so if it looks like it's going to take more time, we bring them in, the Guard in, to help with that. As John mentioned, Wisconsin was not unique or spared. Last August, there was a cyber attack that affected several hospitals across Wisconsin and Illinois. And again, not only just for day-to-day healthcare operations, but also sensitive patient data is at risk with those type of attacks. So I guess the one thing I would say is kind of on the heels of talking about how important the Guard is to each state across the nation, and how that allows governors to provide that immediate response to either disasters or emerging threats. LP 480, not only was there the COG letter, but there was also a letter that was sent that was signed by 53 governors. So it's pretty incredible, I would say, to get 53 governors to agree on anything. But that also goes to show that it wasn't just the states affected by that, that it was ubiquitous across all governors, because every governor fully recognizes how important the Guard is to doing the work of responding to these disasters. So not really much of a question. I said get our plug-in saying that Jason and I we both have our bosses have the same responsibilities and same priorities when it comes to protecting the Guard and the work that we all do back in our states.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds silly, but when the yogurt hits the fan, 9 times out of 10, we turn to the Guard. And so if the federal government wants us to be able to respond with maximum effectiveness, we really need the federal government to recognize and respect the role of the Guard in state responses across the entire portfolio of emergencies.
Hi, I'm Alan Roberson with the Associated State Drinking Water Administrators, and I have a question for John. Water cybersecurity is being in the news too. We haven't had as many attacks as United Healthcare, thankfully, but one never knows. I noticed in your testimony, y'all have 4 years for the hospital to comply with those essential cybersecurity practices. Is that enough time? Does that mean ANOVA compared to a little town and anywhere?
Thank you for your question. That is a key point. For some larger organizations, which generally have mature programs, these 10 essential and 10 enhanced practices are basically something that would be fairly easy for them to attain, easy in quotes. But we are concerned about the less resourced hospitals, rural hospitals, what we call critical access, 25-bed, remote, where the next nearest hospital is 100 miles away, urban safety net hospitals serving these very, very poor communities, that the funding proposed in HHS's presidential budget, is woefully inadequate. And that's one of our big asks, that again, we support these practices. We want all hospitals to comply. It is an issue of resources for these smaller hospitals. And we hope the federal government will step forward with these resources to help, again, defend these hospitals. Ultimately, an attack, any cyber attack, which disrupts or delays healthcare delivery, is a risk to patient safety and is a threat to life matter, a threat to life crime. So thank you for that.
Billy with Governor Hobbs in Arizona. I'm not going to touch on 480 because my colleagues already did, so we won't belabor that point. Thank you for bringing up water. We hear this whole year there's been sort of a cadence of messages out of the White House saying that we need to be prepared in all of these different facets and industries. But again, I think John also touched on the discrepancy, this disparity between rural and urban, or large-scale infrastructure and small-scale. In Arizona, our cybersecurity team, housed in our DEMA, has dealt a lot with schools and small institutions that do not have the means, the IT staff, the firewalls, the resources to fend off or even pay for a ransomware attack. And so, as our congressional staff colleagues, which I was once one day, or in the past, when you're looking at the holistic approach of how this country needs to continue to build out our cybersecurity infrastructure, we need to understand how those critical nodes need to be addressed in terms of funding. Our state does not have the funding to reach out to every single person, and that is going to be a critical problem as we go forward, and each state has those asks. We hear it all the time. So just implore you that if there are additional appropriations to these accounts, that we really pinpoint some of those needs. And I say that as a state that's reshoring some of the largest manufacturing reshoring efforts of chip manufacturing in the country. We have, obviously, those companies have the infrastructure and the IT infrastructure, but maybe their subs don't. Maybe the IT of the trades unions that are there don't. And so we have some critical things that we need to focus on, and we're a little behind the ball to do it. So more of a statement rather than a question, but maybe to the question, is anybody at the panel, are you looking at, and maybe Russ from the NEMA side, are you hearing this from emergency managers? I know you guys just met last month. What is sort of the dialogue with the emergency managers? I know Gabe from our office brought this up as well. What are you hearing from other states?
Very similar, and the fact that the cyber grant that has been made available to the states is a 3-year program, and there's absolutely, it won't make a dent in what needs to be done at the state level. So either the states need to step up, but at the same time, the federal government needs to continue that beyond the 3 years. It's just not going to, again, it's not going to address the issues. And the issues are far greater than just saying to a state, take care of your cyber, because there are so multiple networks involved that it's the same thing at the local level, so that you have the school system, the local government, the local public safety, all of which have got to be addressed at a minimum. So it's a very good point, I appreciate it. And that is our cry on that one, is that it's got to be continued beyond the 3 years.
Good morning, I'm John Workman with Esri. We provide GIS software to all the states and the territories for resilience and other purposes. There's been a big point of emphasis in the administration in rolling out the bipartisan infrastructure funding to get plans coming into DOT and other agencies that are based on resilience planning in the out decades. NOAA even released a system called CAMRA, the Climate Mapping for Resilience and Adaptation tool, that enables states and communities to do infrastructure planning in a resilient fashion. How do you think the states and localities are doing at that? And are we going to, see an infrastructure system that does look more resilient in the coming years?
Is that me?
Well, I mean, one size doesn't fit all. Keep that in mind. Take Vermont for example. We put all of our village centers where the power was, and the power was where the river was. And we got a bunch of mountains. They're beautiful. You should come check them out. But all that rain rolls downhill, right? So when we talk about resilience, in our case, for a large amount of area and a large number of communities, you're talking about building up, which is expensive, or moving out. And those are our two choices. So you can have all the fancy software you want, but at the end of the day, that's the decision you have. That's the decision point that you reach. Are we building up? Or are we moving out? So I just offer that perspective to underscore one size don't fit all, ever.
I think that's the really important point, is that it's a difficult question. It needs to be answered state for state, and then it needs to dive deeper into the locales with that. And that's why, for example, with us in Maryland, we created the Office of Resilience, housed it in emergency management, and it's in all hazards. so that we can address across the board. And we look at resilience as not only, build up or move out, we also look at it as the other approach is capability development. So if you need critical facility needs protection versus being able to pull it out, then that's what we do too. So it's a consideration across all three.
Just to offer a perspective on the national level, I think the federal government and the states really need to align on a national incident response plan and look at national resiliency in terms of grid, electronic telecommunications as well. It was mentioned here the threat posed by China, the Chinese Communist government, called Volt Typhoon. This is destructive malware which has been found on our telecommunications and internet provider services grids as well. So we need to plan on a national level what happens if we do lose that telecommunications in the event, or highly likely event, that China invades Taiwan in the coming years. So again, I think there's got to be individual patchwork in states, individually unique, but also how do we combine this with the national incident response plan as well?
Yeah, it's a really good reminder of how these natural disasters intersect with the other bullshit.
Right.
Like every time we have a natural disaster of any magnitude, our foreign adversaries are hassling us on the cyber side.
Yep.
And they have become inextricably linked. Like now, whenever we have moderate flooding, I know we got to be on high cyber alert. Like they are just inextricably linked.
All right, Jason, I'm gonna give it to you to close this out.
Well, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. We really appreciate your time. We have a panel of real experts here. I was going to say I'm the show horse, not the workhorse, but that's not true either. But we'd be happy to answer any additional questions. We really appreciate your attention to this range of issues. The responsibility of our task force is in some ways very, very narrow and specific, and in other ways incredibly broad and growing in its relevance. And that's really, I think, the point that we want to leave you with today is that we feel as states and territories the increasing pressure of responsibility to respond, and the best way to respond is to be prepared. And we really need federal partnership to heighten our preparedness to handle whatever it is we're going to be dealing with at the state and local level. Thank you.
Thank you.